want you to do a goddamn thing. I want you to have a fucking brain. Worst shit that I could have ever had put together. Two goddamn big ass children. Fucking idiots. Serve no goddamn purpose.
Is this prevalent among staffs on Capitol Hill? No. Is this normal for Sheila Jackson Lee office? Yes. This has been documented for years. There is a group on the Hill that are former staffers of Sheila Jackson Lee that have t-shirts, I'm not joking, that say, I survived Sheila Jackson Lee's office.
It is Tuesday. This is the Sean Spicer Show. Welcome. Listen, we are down to what I think, as of at least our airing, another nominee. Man, it's sort of like, I don't know that you want to be that person. We had Kevin McCarthy, then Steve Scalise, then Jim Jordan. It now looks like Tom Emmer, the majority whip from Minnesota, is the next person to get the tail pinned on the donkey, if you will. We are working through some machinations. The morning started with 8. We had Dan Muser yesterday. He had said he was going to run. He laid out his agenda. And then within an hour or so after the show, he said he was dropping out. He clearly didn't have the support he needed. Why? And that's what I want to get into today. Why? What are the qualities that we're looking at? Muser had this 6-point plan. We talked about it. But what are the members looking at and what should they look at? Today, I've got two great guests, Matt Schlapp, who's head of CPAC, the American Conservative Union, and former Congressman Doug Collins of Georgia, a very conservative former member of Congress. What should we be looking for? What are those qualities? The leadership, the fundraising capabilities, the policies, the priorities, the passion to fight. What should we be doing? We're going to have a great conversation about that. Plus, as I said, we are going to sit down and talk about Sheila Jackson Lee. Doug Collins sat on a committee with her, the Judiciary Committee. He knows what it's like. Matt Schlapp is a former staffer. Why do people work for members of Congress that berate them with profanity-laced tirades, as Sheila Jackson Lee did? There's this audio recording that has come out now, and it shows her just debasing these staffers, calling them names. And she's saying, well, I have high standards. This is a little bit more than high standards. So I'm going to ask Doug Collins how she compares to the other members. Is this normal for how members of Congress treat their staffs? And then Matt Schlapp, who was a staffer. Why would someone work for that person? I mean, is it that big of a deal? I don't know, but I got to imagine that if you're that person, you don't want to do that. So we have a great panel for you today. As I said, we're getting it from both sides. Doug Collins was a former member of Congress from Georgia. He's an Air Force veteran. He's still serving. He's the host of the Doug Collins podcast. He ran for the Senate in Georgia. So he knows what it's like to be a member of Congress. He was involved in the conference when he was up there. So he knows what it's like to be part of the leadership team and to evaluate these candidates. What should we be looking for? The process by which we're evaluating these people. What are we actually asking the right questions? And as we started off the day with 9, and it looks like we're ending with 1, are we picking the right person? Are we looking at this the right way? Because as I said before, and I just want everyone to understand this, if we don't keep this majority, it's all for naught. If Biden can run the table, the progressive agenda is unfathomable. The country that we know and love, I think, is gone. You can't turn back the clock. The investigations, all of it goes away. And I think that people have to understand what's at stake. That's what I look at this from. Do I want the most conservative candidate? Yes. Do I want someone who's going to fight? Yes. I want someone who's going to take it to the Democrats and actually take it to someone in our own party. I want President Trump to have a good partner when he becomes president again. Because according to the polls, that's where we're headed. So we need to know, is that person the right person? Can they raise the money? Can they put the agenda together? Can they make an articulate case as to why we're doing a better job? That's what I want to see. Are they willing to fight to reform the system and make sure that we stop spending and governing through omnibus and continuing resolutions? That's what we need to be known. Is that person the right person? And Matt Schlapp, obviously the head of the Conservative Political Action Committee, those are the people who score them. Are we evaluating these people the right way in terms of the conservative values they have? Anyway, we're going to have a great conversation with them starting now. All right, folks, I've told you before about how I start off my morning. Today's Tuesday, but it doesn't really matter. Sometimes in the morning, you need a little extra kick. And I'm not talking about your coffee. I'm talking about a morning kick, a true morning kick. And Chuck Norris is a guy that I've watched my whole life in movies, in action. And he's 83 years old. The guy looks like he's 53. He's still going. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what makes someone like him stand out? Well, as you can imagine, it's not just health and fitness. He finally figured out supplemental, like how to create a good set of supplements in one actual formula. And he did it through a thing called Morning Kick. He took 10 of his all-time favorite supplements, put them together in something that is, I think, tastes great. It's strawberry lemonade. I mix it in a cold water. I like putting a little ice, although this weekend I kept the ice out. But you mix it up. I think it tastes fantastic. It continues to help you increase your energy levels. It helps with digestion, mental clarity. It's got the probiotics, the prebiotics, the superfoods, all the things that they're telling you to take, except it tastes amazing. He's put it all together in one thing. If you want to try it, you can go over to Chuck's website at mymorningkick.com/Spicer, mymorningkick.com/Spicer. Try it. You will not be disappointed. I do it every morning. It's our own little way of being like Chuck Norris. All right, we're going to start the conversation off with Congressman Doug Collins, and then Matt Schlapp will hopefully join us in a bit. So, Congressman, let me start with something that before we get to what's going on in the speaker's race. A former colleague of yours, Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas, is running for mayor of Houston. She was caught on audio having a conversation with her staff. I want to play a bit for it from our audience. We will make sure that we keep this family friendly, but take a listen.
I don't want you to do a goddamn thing. I want you to have a fucking brain. I want you to have read it. I want you to say, Congresswoman, it was such and such date. That's what I want. Worst that I could have ever had put together. Two goddamn big-ass children. Fucking idiots. Serve no goddamn purpose. Ain't managing nobody. Nobody's respecting them. Nobody gives a shit about what you're doing.
All right, so, Congressman, let me just ask you this, to put it bluntly. Is this a one-off, the way this member is treating her staff, or is this like something that's more prevalent among how members relate to the folks that work for them?
Let me rephrase this. Is this prevalent among staffs on Capitol Hill? No. Is this normal for Sheila Jackson Lee office? Yes. Okay.
Really?
Yes. This has been documented for years. She has been labeled the worst boss on the Hill. Her turnover rate is 500 times higher almost, and I'm maybe exaggerating, but not much. I mean, I've worked with Sheila. I know Sheila, and this is not personal with Sheila. I mean, I've got along with her. We've traveled. I mean, she's been on travel trips that we've done and everything else. But no, there is a group on the Hill that are former staffers of Sheila Jackson Lee that have T-shirts. I'm not joking. That say, "I survived." You know, that's been reported that say, "I survived Sheila Jackson Lee's office." Look, Sheila is a passionate individual, but this is well
That was
known.
very political of you. Passionate.
Yeah,
That's what I think.
This is well known.
I mean, she has a statement that she put out. At heart, I am someone who tells it straight, she said. I know that as much as this is a strength, it can sometimes be a challenge to balance. She calls them, I mean, look, I get being tough and demanding and saying these
tough.
People that I serve need help and I'm here to provide it to them. I get that. But either hire better people or don't treat them this way.
No, she's had some good people. I mean, and I think that's the interesting issue. Again, they don't maybe meet her standards, but look, this is a underreported but well-known story on the Hill for 20 years. Okay. There would be times that, especially because she and I served on the Judiciary Committee together, there would be times in a Congress, if you lose one or two staffers in a Congress, which is a 2-year cycle, that's, that could be a lot. But we were times when we didn't know who the staffer for her in Judiciary was going to be because it changed so much. This is just known. I mean, and I hate to be, because I consider Sheila a friend in the sense that we know each other, and I don't, but her staff turnover is horrific, and the way this happens, and the reports of this kind of behavior it's just interesting that this one got caught on tape.
So let me ask you this: if she's the 10, First of all, is she the worst, or is there anyone worse than her?
I haven't heard. It's not been as public. I mean, there are others who have some pretty high turnover rate, but Sheila's in a class by herself on this.
Okay, so she's the 10. How many 8s and 5s are there?
Yeah, about like anything. I think probably the bell curve kind of work here. You probably have 10% in that middle 7, 8 area. Most are 5 and below. As far as again, where they come from, what their backgrounds are. Most of the staff, most of the members realize that if you don't have good staff and you don't keep them up, there's no way you can physically and mentally keep up with what's going on Capitol Hill without having good staff. I treasured my staff. I still consider my staff family. I've actually performed, Sean, I think I'm coming up on 10 weddings over the past 10, 12 years of staff members.
All right, so that puts you at the lower end. If they're actually,
I'm maybe the opposite here because they're so valuable. But there's a lot that come into it from the business world, and it's more I'm the boss, you're the worker, and that mentality instead of the collaborative effort that you see.
All right, let's move on to this race for speaker. Obviously, we're talking before this is finalized today, but let me just ask you, and I want to ask Matt this later, but I feel like. All right, let me start with you like this. What should the qualities of a speaker be? In other words, what if you were back in your old position, what would you be looking for among the candidates as, say, the number 1, number 2 issue that they're putting forward for their candidacy?
Not really issues. I want to see the statements. This is what I would look for. I would not look for a speaker except on what I'll call moral turpitude issues, such as abortion, those kind of things. Second, I don't want to hear someone come in and say, I will never do. Because in this role, you've got to put forth the best you can for your conference and then be willing to get what you can going forward. So if you go into it basically saying, I'll never compromise on anything, you're basically shutting yourself down again. So the first thing I look for is how they manage and how they think about ideas, how they think about stuff like the budget, which, by the way, this is not being discussed. The CR, FAA reauthorization, Farm Bill, all these kind of things that need to get done. I want to see somebody who's willing to do the most conservative possible thing, but yet be willing to be able to get stuff done and have a long-term possibility. And number 2, I want somebody that then can go explain that through press conferences, through members' districts, however they want to, so that they can say, here's what we did, here's why it's the best, and be willing to work with media to do that. The last part you got to have here is, because we've added this to the job, is you need somebody willing to give 200 to 300 days of their life every year to be the main face and fundraiser for the conference. And That's something that's going to be interesting because nobody's talking about that right now.
Yeah. All right, guys, I want to tell you about what my friends over at Delta Rescue are doing. This is a super sanctuary for pets that have been abandoned in the wilderness. I'm talking dogs, cats, horses. If you go to their website, deltarescue.org, you can see the videos and the pictures of what I'm talking about. This is truly a super sanctuary. It's not a shelter. This is where these dogs and cats and horses that have been abandoned in the wilderness. Some people have thought they were going to care for a pet during COVID, couldn't handle it. Delta Rescue takes care of these people for life. The veterinary care, the nutritional care, a place to roam freely. Go to the website, deltarescue.org, check it out, see the videos, see the amazing work that they're doing. But the thing is, Delta Rescue relies solely on our contributions, $5, $100, $1,000. They do this because this is a lifelong mission for their founder, Leo Grillo. This is what he wants to do. He wants to make sure that it's in perpetuity. If we can go and help endow this place through a contribution, that's what they rely on. Please go to deltarescue.com. You can call them. You can, they'll send you their newsletter. You can see the work that they're doing, but please go support the amazing work that they're doing at Delta Rescue, deltarescue.org. We're joined now by Matt Schlapp. Matt, you heard Congressman Collins bring up the most conservative candidate. What should members of Congress right now be looking at as the criteria as to who should be their leader? What should be that number 1 issue that they care about?
I know I'm an old guy, but when I was a staffer, we actually had a budget process and the appropriations committees had tons of hearings. And you tried to fix through the appropriations process a lot of the legislative stuff you can't get done. I think we've gotten lazy. I think the Senate has dominated these decisions. I think Mitch McConnell has decided that he wants to do everything at the last second and without a lot of public scrutiny. And he's a spender. He's an appropriator. He's okay with spending everything the Democrats want to spend as long as we get some of the spending that we want as Republicans. And that's a recipe for disaster. I mean, there's no reason why the Republicans should be voting for any budget vehicle that fully funds what Merrick Garland's doing at DOJ. I know that's a tough battle, but I mean, if we fund the weaponized government that's putting our friends in jail and in harm's way and getting, making them bankrupt as they pay for lawyers, we're going to lose this republic.
So Congressman, the thing that's interesting about what Matt says, and I get it, it's the process. I've heard that over and over again from members, because the degree of conservatism, and I'll ask Matt about this in a second. You mentioned abortion. I think every one of the 9, we're now down to less than that, but at least every one of the 11 that has put their name forward, including Jordan Scalise, is pro-life. So what is that discerning factor in your mind? Because I think, to Matt's point, what I want to see is somebody that's going to say, I am willing to lead in terms of stopping some of this funding that's going on, putting some discipline back in our budget process. But I think that part of this comes down to the style and the leadership versus necessarily the issue, because I, at least on face value, don't see a lot of difference and a lot of daylight on what these guys stand for.
I don't disagree. And I think what my opening statement was when I said I want somebody who's willing to get into and say, look, we're going to find the most conservative solution, find it. That inherently builds into what Matt says. And I agree with Matt completely on this. The appropriations process is broken. When you've had basically 4 times in 50 plus years that the Budget Control Act has actually worked, that's broken even in Washington, D.C. So, yes, how you do what was just mentioned, how you get back at Department of Justice, how you do these things is by, why not? I mean, again, go to a speaker who's saying to the appropriations chair, look, by May, you will start putting bills on the floor. Right. And then we're going to find 217 people to vote for it. Remember, in the House, you can never blame the minority for not passing something. You never can. Right. You have to blame the majority if they can't put their own bills on the floor. So that's what I mean by having somebody with that fortitude to get the most they can, then send it over to the McConnell and Schumerites over there, let them play with it. And then when it comes back, say, well, that was pretty good, but we're not ready to settle here. We're going to come back and we're going to get you this. We'll leverage our part to leverage what we need. You're going to leverage this. But that's somebody who has a strong leadership capability to explain that.
Matt, Punchbowl News put out this chart of all the candidates when this next round came forward with a bunch of issues and kind of tried to lay out any of the differences. As far as CPAC, the organization that you lead, is concerned, you guys do ratings. How much difference is there between the candidates that have run for speaker, all 11 of them? Is there that much of a difference?
Yeah, massive difference. We've been putting the ratings out throughout the whole process. But the fundamental thing, Sean, comes down to the same thing I just said. You literally have Republicans, and I don't know what Doug has said on this, and Doug always had a good rating with us, but like this idea that we start by saying the one thing we don't want to do is shut down government is insane. Ronald Reagan shut it down 8 times, and that's when a large percentage of the federal government went through the appropriations process. We got the government on autopilot today. It's a tiny little sliver that goes through the appropriations process. And one of the mantras is we will never shut down government. We don't want to shut down government. So since it's our only tool that we have, which is we're serious when we say we want to defund Jack Smith, if you say we're serious, we want to defund him, but we'll never fight that hard to defund him, you will lose that battle. And that's why we're $33 trillion in debt. But more than that, that's why we don't win on these little funding fights. The only thing we can do is plus up some of the DOD accounts. And the problem with that today is you've got a lot of conservatives around the country who are very alarmed by what we're doing with Ukraine, how we seem to be just kind of tripping into, perhaps even a nuclear confrontation, and it scares the hell out of them. And the idea that we don't have the ammo, and Sean, you're the Navy vet here, but we don't have the ammo, the munitions, we don't have the readiness with our troops that we need to take care of things that are vitally important to us. The southern border is a demonstration of that. They're cynically trying to say we should put some more immigration judges in here, which I'm for, but it doesn't do you any good to add judges when the damn border is allowing thousands and thousands of people in every week. So we have this insane process, and we just have to say enough's enough. And it starts with this speaker vote. If we get the same old, I just think people are going to start abandoning our party.
Yeah. I think that look, to me, this is a leadership moment. I agree with you. We've got to start saying we're not going to do business as usual. We're going to redo the appropriations process. We're going to fight for lower government. And frankly, that word fight, I agree. These guys who keep talking about, well, the Senate's going to do this, I get it. And I think you're right, Matt. Go in there and just say, I don't really care that this isn't what they want. We're co-equal branches. We are co-equal within the branch. And we get to have a say as well, not just roll over when Schumer and McConnell send us something. Doug, I want to tweak or get your take on some messaging, both of you. Okay. But I'll start with you. When I started in politics, and I brought this up on yesterday's show with Dan Muser, the term rhino was used for people who ran as Republicans in name only, which is what it stands for, meaning they ran as a Republican, but they weren't strong fiscally. They didn't really care about lowering taxes. They didn't want a smaller government. You ran as a Republican, but you really weren't one. Now we throw that term around if you don't vote for somebody that I like. You didn't vote for Jim Jordan, so you're a rhino. You didn't vote to do X. It's more of a process thing. What do you think about how the term is being used, especially in light of the candidates that are running and the people who are opposing some of them?
Well, there was an old statement and it came in a movie one time. I think it was the old movie Charlie Wilson's War. Y'all probably both remember this. And Charlie looks to his friend and he says, look, he said, I have a problem with you using my name all the time. Sometimes I'd like to use it and I'd like it to still have a pretty good connotation. Rhino at one point, like you said, had a reason. And now it's become thrown around for everything from, whatever it may be. Is there still meaning behind it? Yes. But I want to go back to something, just that we just said here. And I think it goes back to, I was on Air Force duty last week. The world situation is terrible. And yes, we've got a Congress that's ineffective. I think you're exactly right about leadership. Leadership, though, goes to these battles with McConnell and Schumer on what we're talking about messaging here, not from a name calling perspective, but they go to them with a process that works and says, look, here's our position. You're not putting in position forward. We're going to stand on our position. If you don't want to deal with it, then you're the one that's causing the problem. We in the House, because of lack of leadership and lack of fortitude, have just caved because we're not willing to bring the hard decisions forward. We're not willing to go to the Senate. We're not willing to say, here's our position. You tell us what your position is. Instead, we sort of get into circular firing squad messaging wise, saying, well, that's not conservative. That's not good enough. This is not good. But yet we could put together a package that says we're going to now send it over to the Senate, which, by the way, that's the constitutional way to do it. McConnell, Matt, you brought this up earlier. Matt, McConnell is very happy to do an unconstitutional version of budgeting, which says that spending bills originate in the House, not the Senate. By the way we're doing it, they're originating in the Senate. They're just taking our bills and doing it backwards. That's the messaging that's got to occur to us to stand firm to the people who vote for us.
Matt, what do you think about, you guys are the standard bearer of conservative. You give out the score. What do you think about how Rhino is being thrown around now?
Well, okay, so we say in our scores, because Reagan said if you're with me 80% of the time, you're my 80% friend. So we start giving awards at 80%, which is a C when you're in school. So, it's pretty generous. But
just so we're clear, hold on. That's a B. I know what it's like to get a C.
It is? I thought it was a C.
No,
in Oregon, they don't even keep grades anymore.
I'm very clear with the lower end of C's and D's. A C is 79. That's actually a C plus. That's a C plus. Don't. I got plenty of 80s, and that was a goal. So don't rob me of my B, Matt Schlapp.
Okay, so let's step into the actual numbers. So Emmer has an 80, Jordan had 100, and that 20 points is a big deal.
Right.
And the biggest deal in that is that when it comes to these spending measures, Jim Jordan wants those fights. Most Republicans, even the ones who run as conservatives, don't want spending fights. They feel like they're losers. And they didn't learn the Donald Trump lesson, which is you start off on the House side where we have a majority with your most hardcore position. And over time, you are going to have to compromise with the Senate. Even if we ran the Senate with Republicans, as you know, we'd never run it because there'd be 3 or 4 of our people that would immediately go vote with Democrats. The Senate is a problem in and of itself. We do a whole show on that. But you got to start with your standard on holding the line. And what the Republicans are doing in the House is saying, we always lose to the Senate anyway. And Joe Biden's over there in the White House. So we might as well just give in and not make it seem like we're going to fight. And that's a disaster. So yes, are there rhinos who are all over this space for leadership? Of course, there have been rhinos that are all over it and all over it. I think if you're not willing to say that you would defund Jack Smith and what Merrick Garland is doing to literally put you in prison if you're a Republican, then I don't know why you're in Congress. Just go away. It's not your time.
All right, folks, it's Halloween season, and you're probably thinking that this weekend or maybe one night you want to sit back and watch a Halloween-themed movie, a spooky movie, a scary movie. You know, you think, oh, I'll watch Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street, but not on your Netflix account. You can't do that. Or can you? Or can you? If you download on your computer or your tablet or your phone ExpressVPN, you can. How? And I'm not even a tech guy, but I thought to myself, how is this possible? The thing about getting ExpressVPN is you download it on your computer and they change your online location. They let the computer think that you're in another country. So there's various Netflix. I didn't even know this. So we in the US get Netflix US. There's certain movies that are on there. But if you wanted to watch the movies that I was just talking about, Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street, they're on the Canadian Netflix. So you just change on ExpressVPN where your computer thinks you are. And you can do that. But it's even better. If you wanted to watch Scream, you open up ExpressVPN, you switch your location to Canada with one click, and boom, it's there. Let's say that you wanted to go watch, let's say I'm looking here, all the Lord of the Rings movies. You just switch it to Australia. You want to watch Top Gun? It's on the German Netflix. It's easy. And think about that. If you wanted to go find all these on other subscription services, you're going to pay a ton more, $50, $100, who knows? You had to go subscribe to all these other things, Amazon, Apple, whatever. But you can actually get it all with ExpressVPN on Netflix. You just change where you're going from. So ExpressVPN works on everything, whether it's just your computer, like I've got here, my laptop, your tablet, your TV, your phone, and all the streaming services. It's not just Netflix, but Disney, BBC iPlayer, Shudder, you name it. So if you want to get your money's worth out of these subscriptions you're already paying and get a couple months of ExpressVPN for free, go to expressvpn.com/Spicer, expressvpn.com/Spicer, and you will get more than your money's worth. It's funny because you brought up Jordan and Emmer, right? What are those big votes, if you know, that between the 100 of Jordan and the 80 of
Spending.
Emmer?
I believe off the top of my head, it's the spending fights and the cultural fights. I think.
But don't you think it's weird that you have a guy that was 100 and a guy that's 80, at least who, as of the taping of right now of what we're talking about, and yet the hit against Emmer is, quote, that he's not MAGA enough, not that he's not conservative enough.
No. That's wrong. No. The difference in the score is on your conservatism. And I would say off the top of my head, I'm not looking at our ratings as we're doing this, but on the spending fights and the cultural fights, Emmer is one of these kind of Paul Ryan people that believe that that voting card.
But that's my point, Matt. And again, if I'm getting this wrong, let me know. But my point is, you guys are putting him at 80. And when I hear the criticism from members about Emmer, it's not about his voting records per se. It's about whether or not he's supportive of President Trump enough.
Okay, but I can't score that, right? Because there's no
House, I get it. But that's
no
what
House
I find
score
ironic.
on Trump, so his score would be lower if we're taking that into account. I would actually say conservatives, I'll give you some more feedback beyond our ratings. Look, our ratings are one piece that I think members should use to determine a member's conservatism. But there's another piece. Emmer does get high marks from conservative members for being shooting straight with him. And I think that was their problem with McCarthy, even though Emmer and McCarthy are great allies. I think they felt with McCarthy, he was saying what he needed to do to get the votes through the 15 rounds. But then they felt like it wasn't a sincere pledge to follow through on it. And I think they felt behind they could deal with Emmer, and they felt like he was a straight shooter. So even when a member isn't that conservative, there's other qualities that matter too. I think one of the things about Jim Jordan, people said, well, he's 100 and he can't compromise. And the fact is Jim Jordan stuck with Donald Trump, even when Donald Trump took some positions that maybe Jim Jordan wouldn't have taken. And I didn't think he was sharp-elbowed. I think he was a good choice. Steve Scalise is in the 90s, and he's another person who I think has demonstrated strong conservatism over his time in Congress. So a little bit of this is funny, but I do think there's an extreme difference now. I think you want to pick a speaker who will have the spending fight and tell Mitch McConnell, I'm sorry, you only run one half And really, it's the least important chamber, because even when you're a leader in the Senate, it doesn't matter much, because every individual member has so much power. So let's pick a speaker who will fight.
Yes. That's Doug, you brought something up a minute ago that I want to touch base, because I know you're going to have to leave in a second, and I'll continue with Matt on a couple things. But before you leave, you brought up fundraising. And I know it's, call it what you will. I know when I bring this up, sometimes people say, oh, that's ridiculous. The bottom line is this. The way I look at this House election is the House of Representatives is the only thing that Republicans have standing between Joe Biden and a massively progressive agenda. And if we lose that check, we're in trouble. You look at some of the seats that are in play, the Alabama redistricting, we go into this election not with a majority, probably down 1 or 2 seats. Mm-hmm. And so the speaker's ability to raise enough money to keep and maintain and hopefully grow a majority is important. And yet I don't really hear any of the candidates talking about their ability to replicate the huge amount of money that Kevin McCarthy raised to keep and grow a majority. And as horrible as some people may think that is to discuss, it's a reality if you want to stop the Biden agenda.
It's a reality check. Whether you like it or not, it's just true. And it looks like I'm going to be sort of prognosticating here a little bit. You're coming down to probably an Emmer Johnson race today is what it's looking like as we're taping and as we're going through this. And the question I'm having right now, though, is the divided House still looks very split, and can they get these numbers to the floor? But let's take this to a point. Now you have to go and you have to look at an Emmer speakership, which, again, I think there's some problems with. I think that Johnson, who is unknown to most, but I think, Matt, to you and us, he's very well known as far as especially some of his conservative credentials.
Yep.
Very good. I've worked with him a lot. I like Mike. But the question's going to come now in that third component, and I know who's actually asking this. Richard Hudson, who's the head of the NRCC, is very worried about this, is will these people be able to get on the road, get out there and re-energize our giving base, our donor base in the middle of a presidential cycle when, Sean, you just actually laid it out. One seat in Alabama is already gone. We have up to 7 seats in New York that are hanging by a thread right now on a court case up there. You've got the Santos seat up there that God only knows what's going to happen with. So, yes, we're starting out, frankly, if you just look at it from that perspective, at a tie or worse going into this. And that's where that, and people say, does it matter between a Republican? I hear this uniparty stuff a lot. I'm really get tired of it. And I know we could argue this all day long. But at the end of the day, it is the only thing holding Biden back from doing massive amounts of damage that he's already done if we don't have the House. So it's got to be figured into this process somewhere. And groups like Matt, which do a great job of getting this information out, always need help from others as well. And that's where the speaker plays in. Whether you like it or not, money is a part of it.
Congressman, I know you got to go. Matt, I'll let you drop off. Matt, I want to stay with you if I can and answer the same question. How important, I get you look at things from the CPAC lens as how conservative are people, what are their priorities, but how important should the fundraising aspect be as we evaluate this?
Oh, look, I'm a practical person. Politics is a practical game. And we are substantially outraised by the left. I mean, just with the top 4 or 5 or 6 billionaires on the left, right there alone, we can't compete. Think about the over $400 million Mark Zuckerberg spent to try to have illegal voting in the last presidential election. So we are way outgunned. I would just simply say this. When Donald Trump was last on the ballot, we actually picked up House seats. It's one of the reasons I know that I don't actually think he lost that race, because that was a real anomaly that we hadn't seen before. And I think that, unfortunately or fortunately, depending on people's point of view, it's very hard to run as just an independent candidate with your own views. You're going to be in this whole big effort as to whether or not America should go woke, should America go socialist, or is our founding a virtuous founding? And that is what this whole fight's going to be about. And if you're running for the House of Representatives, you're going to be caught up in that big ideological question. That makes it harder for these members who are from New York, who, win by being maybe technocrats and not being so ideological. But the fact is, New York City is riddled with murder and crime, and voters are really upset about it. So I think we all just got to understand that is more than money. That is what leads to our success. And Donald Trump has been this antidote to money in politics, where he seems to be able to break through without having to buy all the messaging. And I know it's irregular to some, but this is what we have. We are not going to match the left dollar for dollar. I'd sure like a speaker who can raise as much as possible, though.
So you brought up Trump. He has at least indicated that he's not going to weigh in. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think it's kind of obvious that like he really loves Byron Donalds and they've been on the road a lot together. I think it's obvious that Emmer hasn't endorsed Trump. So people are, raising that, and that's perfectly legit. I also think Donald Trump is being more careful. He got involved in a ton of primaries last cycle. And I think now that he knows his name is going to be on the ballot, that he's got to make friends with everybody. And I think it's smart for him to, try to bring this whole coalition together as much as he can.
So he always referred to Kevin McCarthy as my Kevin. And I think they had a good relationship. There were some bumps. There's no question about it. But he felt like at the end of the day, he could probably count on McCarthy. Should he be concerned? I get your point, and I agree with you that he's a little bit more cautious right now. But considering that if he wins the presidency, which all the polls right now show that he's destined to do that, shouldn't he want the best speaker in that position? And so should he actually care about who wins?
Well, remember, it's always been about McConnell, who really hates Trump, right? And who the speaker is, or who the Republican leader is on the House side, because one of the reasons I suppose Kevin was my Kevin is that he just, he liked the fact that at least he had one of the leaders who he was allied with. And it was kind of ironic because Elaine Chao was in his cabinet, but but still, they didn't have any kind of a relationship really ever. It's a very interesting thing. But look, I think I look at these people running for speaker. I think they're all going to want to have a close relationship with Donald Trump, no matter who wins it. I don't think it's going to be a big problem.
So I want to ask you a CPAC question. I know you guys have a big donor event. Robert F. Kennedy was coming out. There's a lot of folks on the right, and I've talked to plenty of them who are excited about RFK's candidacy. I was when he was primarying Joe Biden. I don't like him as an independent candidate. I think he ultimately hurts Trump. What do you think about his candidacy and the effect on the general election?
I think the only scenario by which he hurts Trump is if he's allowed to campaign on a cloud like he is now. He's kind of like the left loves him because he's got crazy leftist positions, and the right loves him because he hates Anthony Fauci and is mad at the deep state. So he's just, he's living in a world where no one really hits him. And then I saw him go on and have a couple of interviews on Fox and Newsmax. And quite honestly, he doesn't have great answers for these really leftist positions he has. So as this goes forward, he's not going to get away in Republican audiences without having to talk about his support of reparations, his desire to make driving illegal because he's huge into the Green New Deal. He's a gun grabber. He doesn't believe in any regulations on abortion. And if you go through all these issues, it'll become anathema towards Republican voters. So I think the reason why we had him at CPAC is because he has an interesting point of view on his liberal takedown of the Democratic Party because of their support of what he calls the military-industrial complex and their support of what's going on at CDC and NIH and this whole COVID craziness that we've all had to live through. They respect that part of him, and they respect the fact that he's fighting with his family, this very famous Democratic family, on the issues that we do agree with him on. I think what Trump ought to do is make him our food czar, because he's really into fighting big ag and all the chemicals in our food. And he's really into fighting big pharma on the question of, vaccines that aren't properly vetted and such. And he ought to be an advisor to the president. But if I were a Republican voter, there's 18 or 20 issues that he's just way too radical left wing on. And I think that'll become very apparent to voters over time. In the end, I believe he's going to hurt Biden more than Trump.
See, that's where I think that enough people on the right think that somehow they don't see all of the litany of what you just said and see his opposition.
But they will.
You think so?
Oh, yeah. No, look, I'm looking at all these polls, Sean, like you, I read them all. And he's in the double digits as an independent. He's a real voice. We haven't seen that since Ross Perot or John Anderson. He's scoring big in these polls. By the way, 80% of the polls I see show him taking more out of the hide of Biden than Trump. But this is a fair question. We don't know yet how that ends up. But he's garnering a big vote. And
yeah, but where he's getting his media attention, to your point, is Fox and Newsmax. There, and just
but he
to be
didn't
clear,
do well. Did you watch them? I don't think he couldn't answer the basic questions on why a Republican voter would support him.
Yeah, no, I think that if exposed, he's got a problem. I've asked, just to be completely transparent, I've texted him and asked him to come on the show. I think he'd be a great interview because I want to walk through some of those things that he gets to play footsie with the conservative media. And now I think that he's switched from being a challenger to Biden as an independent candidate. There's definitely a lot more scrutiny. Matt, before I let you go, I want to ask you, I started this conversation with Congressman Doug Collins about a clip that I played from Sheila Jackson Lee, some leaked audio.
Yeah.
Where she berates her staff. I asked Congressman Collins about it from a member standpoint, where she ranks among all the members about how she treats her staff. You started your career up on Capitol Hill, working for various members of Congress, including a Texas member, if I recall. I'm just trying to remember where everything intertwined. I know you're a Kansas guy, but here's my question for you: What from a staffer perspective? Why do staff work for a member? Wouldn't staff work for a member like her that treat people the way that she does in that leaked audio?
Well, there's an old saying for us staffers, Sean, and that it was awfully hard to work for a stupid member, and it was very hard to work for a member who was a complete jerk. I'll clean it up here a little bit. And the worst case scenario was to work for a stupid jerk. Now, Sheila Jackson Lee is not stupid. She's actually a pretty smart, savvy politician. But she's mean, and I've seen it up close and personal. I saw her berating an airline employee at National Airport one time. I thought she had mellowed with time. We used to call her Queen Sheila because she wore that kind of crown of hair on her head, and she was so imperious to everyone. I thought maybe she had mellowed over the decade she's been in office. I think she got to Congress the same year I started as a staffer. And no, she's got a terrible reputation. And I will say this. I got people criticizing the way I manage and that I'm mean, and I always thought I was actually a pretty likable person. So her problem is that she sounds pretty harsh, and her language is pretty harsh in the tape that was released. But I can tell you, it's not that she just had a bad moment. This is kind of the reputation she has earned for herself, well deservedly. I think Doug agreed over her time in Congress. And as you know, Sean, it's not that unusual for members of Congress to become so self-important that they treat people poorly.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, and Doug brought it up, you mentioned it, but that's not a one-off discussion.
No.
That was her daily way of communicating, not just with staff, but with, public servants.
Hey, you know who else was tough? George W. Bush. Wow. Put a typo in your memo, get something wrong, he'd upbraid you. And, I didn't ever take it in his case. I never took it as him being kind of bullying or mean. I think he expected near perfection from those around him. I wish he had expected that same perfection from those who are running the military and giving him advice on global politics. But as far as those of us who worked in politics and stuff, he was very, very tough. And I always took it first of all, it's a huge compliment to get hollered at by a president of the United States, because that means he respects you enough to let you know how he really feels instead of just being sweet and having one of his staffers yell at you. And second of all, I thought he wanted perfection because he knew how big the stakes were. So, there's a part of me that says about Sheila Jackson Lee, if she wants her staff to do a better job, I like the fact that she's pushing them. I just wish she could do it in a way that would be more constructive, because I think that taped conversation doesn't sound very constructive, especially making fun of somebody's physical appearance and stuff like that.
Right. I mean, she's going after them in very personal ways. I mean, look, I've had a couple not so pleasant conversations with President Trump, but the flip side, and I always tell people, is that he also can go the other way. He would praise you and be like, that was awesome. You killed it. And so you knew where you stood with him, but he went both ways. I've never heard anybody say that Sheila Jackson Lee was kind to them, right? It's always one direction. And I think that's the difference. I never had the opportunity to get yelled at by President Bush, but I think that he also was known for praising people when they did well. And that's the balance. I
will say this. I've had two people that have worked closely with Sheila Jackson Lee in her office who had very positive things to say, not in this question of is she tough on staff. I think that's pretty apparent that she's tough on staff. But that she can be somebody who is kind to work with. So, it's easy to get different perspectives, but it's interesting what you say about Trump, because that's my take on Trump. He'll let you have it if he thinks you're way over the line. But I've never seen somebody, take politics out of it, anybody who's an important person and wealthy, who is as kind and as, when Mercy and I have had rough times, he's usually on the other end of the phone calling us, urging us forward and encouraging us not to get down and saying he's on our side. So you're right. That's a piece of this too. Politicians can yell at staff and they can do things that seem mean, but the humanity of them is, do they have that other piece? And for Trump and Bush, I'll say President Bush as well. President Bush had a very big heart, and he could be just a great dude and buck you up. And that's been my experience with Donald Trump as well.
Yeah. Well, that's a great way to leave it. Matt, thanks for joining us today. I appreciate all the work that you and the folks over at CPAC do to keep us informed as to who's doing their job and not when it comes to supporting conservative principles and policies.
All right, John, thanks for having me on.
You bet. I really enjoyed that conversation today, and I'll tell you why. We keep voting for different people. We've had Jordan, Scalise, people got rid of McCarthy. Now it's Emmer's turn in the barrel. Are we thinking about this in the right way? Are we thinking about it? Are we going to find ourselves back here in a month or 2 months, whatever, because we still have the motion to vacate? That's what I want to solve. Are we focusing on the things that are going to move the movement forward and get us wins? Stop doing the silly and omnibus and continuing resolution spending. Get us back to doing things that are going to win and give us a good partner when we put a Republican back in the White House. That's what we need to be doing. Thanks for what you guys are doing to help support the show. I really appreciate it. Please continue to subscribe. If you can, go to Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star review. And then obviously YouTube and Rumble. Just subscribing helps grow the show. Thank you so much. Continue to tell people I appreciate you all being here. And I'll see you tomorrow on the Sean Spicer Show. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.